must say before we begin, it was such a nice thing to see all your smiling faces for just those few weeks. Now we're back to the eyes.
Mr. President, we are live.
All right, thank you. We'd like to welcome to the Ada County Highway District pre-commission meeting. I would ask if anyone has any questions about the agenda. I know there are 2 items on the consent agenda that have been asked to move over to the regular agenda, and I've asked the director to cover some areas on those items in his director's report, but are there any other questions? Then we will go to the director's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. Good morning and such. I'll go right to the 2 items on the consent agenda. Again, both items are normal operations, general items. We have 17 to 18 of these already in place working forward. The only difference on the one on number 2 is that Meridian asked us in his partnering this. As a matter of fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, last week they've already passed it on consent at the City Council moving forward. So bottom line, this is an opportunity for Meridian, Ada County Highway District, and the Brighton Corporation to partner in bringing forth a project a lot sooner than we would have in the past. It is impact fee eligible. It meets all the criteria across the board. It's a good deal for Meridian. It's a good deal for the Ada County Highway District. And again, I do apologize if I slightly misled any of you, and this is a first. The first was a city actually asked us to partner on this type of development. On the second one, this is again a impact fee eligible project. As you know, Beacon Light has been and will continue to be a 3-line, what I'm going to call rural arterial sort of thing. The commission was very clear on that. And this project adds the appropriate 3 lanes and 10-foot Maltese Pathways across the board in concert with the, if I'm not mistaken, the Greendale subdivision development. So at the end of the day, these are general items. They are, these types have been on consent for many times. And so if there are any specific questions that you'd like to have.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
Was the, on number 3, was this design and agreement anything different than what the commission has debated and gone over time and time again years ago on Beacon Light? Okay.
No, I still have my Save Beacon Light button.
All right.
So, Mr. President, I would continue to ask that we have a full discussion. I have run into this issue with residents on my side of town. They are surprised that the priority gets shifted around.
Can I ask you why they're surprised?
So,
I mean, how do they know so much about our business that they would find any surprise with this at all?
Well, let's have this debate. I would ask that this be put on consent agenda. Thank you.
All right. Both of them or just one of them?
Yes, please.
That's going to be some short presentations. Okay.
We'll be prepared to do that. Commissioners, I'd like to start off this day on a great note. Your team, as you know, put together a tremendous 50th anniversary celebration, and our communications team have put together a short video that we'll be putting on our website and blog, but I wanted you all to see it first. So with that, Stacy, if you could bring that up and play that, please. We are formally celebrating our 50th anniversary of continued outstanding service to Ada County, our unwavering commitment to service before self, excellence in all that we do, our passion for our mission, and to providing the best roadways in Idaho and the Northwest, and some of the best in the entire country of this great country of ours.
We were created as a result of an unselfish public outcry concerning the quality of local government services regarding patient infrastructure. There are none others like us, which is unfortunate because there certainly ought to be.
Ada County
was created 50 years ago. We had a little city and some really tiny towns. And today we are a thriving urban area with urban challenges. So the next 50 years are going to look very, very different. But fortunately, we have very close relationships, and that's a priority. Close relationships with all of the local governments, the state government, and the federal government to understand what it means to have a good, high-quality, multimodal transportation system in an urban area.
I do want to just shout out to the incredible team, everybody that's out there. 50 years, this is incredible. I can't believe that we're here to celebrate this today. And thank you all so much for everything that you do, showing up to work every single day, the commitment that you have for maintaining and improving our roadways. You are the best thing about ACHD. It has been a true honor and a privilege to learn more about all of the ones that I've met, all the different aspects of your jobs, and just to see the care and commitment that you have to doing the best that you can every single day.
Team ACHD, you have transformed every aspect of operations from our start, and all for the better. You have consistently improved, improvised, adapted, and overcome to be the best of the best. Your record, your awards, and your recognition by your peers, locally, at the state and federal levels, unquestionably mark you as gold medal winners. All of you are the inspiration of ACHD yesterday, ACHD today, and ACHD of tomorrow.
Yes. That will go up on the website today, and it's just a tremendous job that your communications team did. So jumping in, and oh, by the way, I think I shared with you, we will be presented the formal, what do we call it, declaration, whatever, from the Senate, proclamation at the golf tournament by Senator Winder on September 11th. And for our newest commissioner, if you are a golfer, we do auction off commissioners. And we do get a lot of money for that for the folks. So if you are a golfer,
my husband is a very good golfer, so I think he'll probably definitely want to participate if that's all right. I don't know if he'll auction for. I don't know if he'll pay up for me, but I don't know. We'll see.
I'll have the general counsel speaking to you about
Thank
that.
you.
And such. And we're doing very well for this year's charity, the Wycombe Warriors, incredibly well. Commissioners, a couple of things I'd like to share with you. First off, regarding some HR issues, although we're doing great on bringing new members in, we're still seeing an exodus of people that are doing different things. You just saw our lawyer depart for a private firm across the board, and of course we're doing different opportunities, and we are seeing retirements coming up, which was predicted. That being said, I wanted to share an interesting statistic with you. Of the people that we have hired back to date, 14% of the new hires are former team members, interns, folks that decided that it's a good place to be here at the Ada County Highway District. So I think that's very, very neat operations. Commissioners, I think Goldthorpe and Hanson, you recall years back when we had an art contest by junior high to pick designs to put on our sweepers. It was very, very successful, great thing. Well, we're going to do that again and such. We've got, we're going out shortly between grades 6 and 9, Ada County residents and such, to do another art contest to continue putting more graphics on our sweepers across the board. There'll be 3 winners, as I understand, or 3 things: the ACHD Staff Choice, People's Choice, and I think one other. That being said, we have 3 categories, and I guess that they've asked me to select it, but I'd like to throw it out to all of you to see what you think. First one is Seasons of Transportation, focusing on the variety of work ACHD does throughout the year. Artists could choose one season or all 4 and depict the important work that occurs during that time. No blue salt. Number 2, Transportation Then and Now, focusing on what transportation looked like decades ago versus what we see on the roads today. They can go back in centuries or focus on the 5 decades that we have served Ada County. And then the third category will be the future of transportation. This theme allows the kids to use their imagination. We've gone from buggies to electric vehicles, but what will it look like 50 years from now? And so those categories are seasons of transportation, transportation then and now, and the future of transportation. So I would greatly appreciate your thoughts on what you might want to see for the contest. But this was incredibly successful years back. It's going to be incredibly successful again, and it continues to lock us in with the neighborhoods and school districts, that sort of thing. Commissioner, you look like you have a question for me.
No, I was just thinking of how little talent I have in that area and always have had in my life, and I would really appreciate that if one of the designs were stick figures. Just kidding.
Thank you, sir. You may have saw this earlier today, and Commissioner May, I'm going to ask a little bit of help from you on this one, I think. I don't know if it's been broadcast yet, but we have our liaisons that go to all the city meetings. They're there all the time, and Star recently had one. And unfortunately, again, the city council deferred items D, E, and F, tabled indefinitely, according to them, due to not receiving ACHD staff reports in time. We worked this about a month and a half ago with the mayor and the group, letting them know that it might be good for them to change their policies like all the other cities do that they postpone scheduled hearings until the traffic impact studies have been done. When they do that, things fly through. For some reason, Star hasn't. I did have that conversation with the mayor. The mayor thought it was a great idea. The unfortunate part here is that, according to the report, the mayor and commissioners made no mention of the application timing, which we did many months back. That conflicts and inferred this was an issue with ACHD, not the timing and acceptance of applications. There was no indication that the application process will change in the near future. So I'm more than happy to make that recommendation to the mayor again. Commissioner May, if you could also help on that. But this will help star out something fierce.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it will get rid of these things and such. But you'll see this later on if you already have it, because we forward all those reports to all of you. But I'd appreciate if you could do that. To the business world, again, I want to keep you updated on the economic status that's going around Idaho, Northwest, and the nation. Right now, and this is percent of annual change from the last time I talked to you, emulsified asphalt, including liquid asphalt additives, are up 15.8%. West region ready-mix concrete is up another 8.3%. Iron and steel, which is kind of interesting that we do use, so it's up 105%. Contractor materials up 33.1%. The CPI, I think it's now, it was at 5.2 a couple days ago. I think it's at 5.4, 5.5 right now. Food and beverages up 4.4%. Transportation up 20.2%. Fuel, always very important to you here at the district in leadership roles. Unleaded gasoline locally up 59%. Diesel local up 68.8%. We use a lot of diesel here at the district. And what's interesting, the gas prices here in Idaho are 75% more per gallon than the national average here in Idaho, which is interesting. And then newly constructed home sold average price is up 33% year to date. And so it continues to be a challenge on all operations. We want to make sure that you are aware of that. And then at the end of the day, that's really about it. I'll stand for any questions you might have that we've answered in the director's report.
I have none.
Mr. President, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
Director, I've gotten some public and private inquiries about the friction seal and floating feather, and I was wondering if you could give us an update on kind of a timeline for. I know we're going to go through the BAC, but what happens after that, and what's our timing to remedy the problem?
I'll give you the straight answer, not the one I was thinking about. It has been a challenge. We went out to floating feather a while back, and the friction seal that we put down at that point, at the first time, appeared to be very well received by the prior committees that we work with. I think we did it again, and for whatever reason, it didn't work as well. I believe 2 weeks ago, 2.5, 3 weeks ago, we were out, we did a double coat. We're still receiving input from the community, but at this point, we're in a, let's see what happens, and I don't have a good answer for you now, but what I will let you know that it is on the radar scope, and we are watching that, and if there's something we can do, we will. In the past, we've tried different additives. Some have worked on certain surfaces, some have not. We've even gone out on chip sealing, and we've re-rolled just the bike lanes so that we could get it more compacted. That wasn't as well received either, but the first attempt on Hill Road, when we did the friction seal around up to the dog bone and past, was well received. And for some reason, it's the same thing. I just don't have a good answer for you right now, but I'll do my best to get you one.
Thank you.
So when we talked about this very thing a couple of weeks ago, we were chatting about how it might have just been utilizing the wrong stretch that had far more deterioration on the asphalt than the other stretches did.
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioners, that's part of it, but really at the end of the day, if we're putting down 2 layers of these things, we should see a better return on the investment. And so I will assure you our pavement management team is looking at this, contracting is looking at it, our inspectors are. We don't.
Yes.
I just had a question in regards to your ops summary that you sent out, or the COVID protocol, and asking to consider a rotation for the commission. Personally, I'm not in favor of doing something like that. I just feel like this is a commission meeting and we need to be here. I think we've demonstrated that if we're not feeling well, people will stay home and take the necessary precautions. So at this time, I think it's important for us to be here. If we need to rotate or roll back a little bit, maybe some of the staff perhaps could just stream from their office or Zoom in with us. So, but right now I think it's important for the commission to be in attendance.
Mr. President, Commissioner Mayor, I couldn't agree more. My intent there was, this is evolving. And it's interesting to it's going to be interesting to see what happens after the fair and all the other things that are going on right now. The idea was just say, what do you think going forward as we continue? I believe we're going to continue to bring in more protocols and start stacking it up, and again on a tiered response, not anything that we just lock down everything and go forward. And that's not what we're going to do. But yes, I will have staff members outside in their offices if we come to that.
If we need to spread out a little bit more, we can do that. And Commissioner Goldthorpe and I were speaking before, and with all the protocol and the steps that we've taken here, we actually feel, this is one of the safer places to
yes,
be.
It is.
And that's because of all the precautions and protocol that we have in place. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
And I just want to build on that. I just want to thank you, Director Wong, for being so responsive and taking initiative to protect our staff and the commissioners and yourself. It's really impressive that we've got such great leadership in that regard that leads with the science. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And we had so much left over. We could just pick right up and re-engage. We knew this was probably coming.
Yeah, and I have asked maintenance not to fog each one of you as you walk out of the building.
That's great.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I would agree with Commissioners May and Pickering entirely. I do want to ask if there's been any follow-up. We rushed through our director's report last week so quickly that the only time I could raise these 2 concerns from constituents was in the public communications. The fatality on Geckler and the need to get a report back. I was hoping I could get a report back on what the investigation told us about Geckler, and the 2 different responses that constituents have gotten on the removal of some of the speed management on Surprise Valley, the Surprise Way, which is a priority corridor for the city. And we got 2 different responses, and I wanted to know whether there's some consistency in there. Report back what progress we've made on making sure controls are put back in. after the resurfacing.
Mr.
The
President.
two concerns I had echoed last week and haven't heard back.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, two things. Number one, you will not receive a report yet on the unfortunate accident. The police have their priorities and their policies and their protocols. We generally get an insight, and I would ask the commission for patience on this. Every accident is tragic. It just is. When the police report is done, then we will be more than happy, because they will ask us not to say anything until it's done, to share with you what the insights were. The unfortunate part is that when you have late night, early morning, high speed, and maybe other things that can be contributory to an accident, we do not second guess. We wait for the experts to say, here, now this may take months. I hope it doesn't. I really do, and such. But as you know, they're still investigating the accident on the young lady who was on the scooter that went across the intersection against the red light. That's still an investigation under, or an accident under investigation. So we will not proceed the police on that. On the second thing that you asked for, very respectfully, those pavers are not speed control. They are not, and Geckler is a collector, if I'm not mistaken. The policy is we do not put speed bumps and this sort of thing on collectors or arterials, as you all know. And so we'll continue to work that. I'm sorry the staff did not get back to you on that, but that's where we are. Those are the two boundaries on that. Yeah, actually, we do put speed
Mr.
bumps.
President?
Yes.
One quick thing, Director Wong, you and I had a great meeting, I think productive meeting, anyway, with TDS
Yes.
representatives on Thursday. So next director's report, could you kind of give a brief summary of what our protocol is now with TDS regarding permits, et cetera, so that the rest of the commissioners
Absolutely.
I think that'd be beneficial.
Absolutely, and Commissioner May is very right. She did great. We had a tremendous meeting with the folks, and Commissioner Goldthorpe, I'll assure you that the tenor did not change.
Good.
We felt the line.
And such on that.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, then we've got 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. President, Commissioners, it's now 12 o'clock.
Thank you. Welcome to the Ada County Highway District. We will begin as usual with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I
Pledge allegiance to the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome. We will begin the meeting. Before we have a motion to accept the agenda, I would like to ask Shandy to introduce us to her latest addition to the Communications Department.
afternoon, Mr. President, Commissioners. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Rachel Bjornstead, who has spent a lot of time in news on the other side of things, helping us stay accountable with Channel 2 as the Content Center Manager. And she has joined us here as our new Public Information Officer, mirroring Matt on our side, pushing out the transparent information in a timely and accurate way for us. So you've probably already seen at least one press release from her. So she's already hit the ground running and is diving right into things. So welcome to Rachel.
Welcome.
Thank you and welcome. Now we'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll go over to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. And there will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. And there has been a request to include item number 2 and 3 on the regular agenda, which will be the case, and item number 2 will become item number 2 on the regular agenda, and item number 3 item number 3 on the regular agenda. With that in mind, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. So here in the regular agenda now, we have a resolution number 2362 for the vacation of right-of-way of a parcel of land on South 8th Street, south of West River Street in Boise. This is a public hearing, and we will hear from Dave Serdar, our right-of-way supervisor.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe, Commissioners. David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor, ACHD. This is a vacation, as President Goldthorpe said, on 8th Street in Boise. It is a vacation to the City of Boise. ACHD received an application from the City of Boise for 0.006 acres. It's actually a very small piece. The City of Boise is not required to pay an application fee on this due to an interagency fee waiver agreement. This is kind of the vicinity map, which is a faraway map. As you can see right here is 9th Street. My eyes are getting bad because I'm having a hard time reading that. And over here is Capitol Boulevard. You can see with the arrow here, this is 8th Street. It kind of comes and makes this turn right here. The area of the vacation is just this little, I want to say, kind of triangular piece down here in the corner. This is a more close-up view of the vacation. Once again, as you can see, it's a really small area. As stated above, with the application fee, there also will be no property fee on this or appraisal due to the fact of the ACHD Boise City fee waiver agreement. So there's 0 funds due to ACHD before the recording. It is staff recommendation that the commission adopt and sign resolution number 2362 authorizing the proposed vacation of public right-of-way, as applicant has completed all necessary requirements. I will remain standing if there are any questions.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
Dave, can you provide some context? Are they kind of reviewing other parcels that are in the right-of-way and will be coming back to us, or did they just stumble upon this and wanted to pursue this, or do you have any information about that?
You know, there's a lot of times it's usually driven by a project.
Okay.
I know there's a lot that's happening with the Wassman Center here, and so that's really what's kind of driven this one. We sometimes, I think it's more that when someone at the city, or there's usually a project that kind of drives this, and we can have discussions anywhere from 6 months to a year to that day when we get it. So it just depends. Sorry.
President, Commissioner Bickering, a little bit ago, we did send a master map out to the cities to say, here's the properties that we own. Is there something here? And I know that Mayor McLean was very focused on seeing if there's something they could use for additional housing and such. They have that. That's one of the ways that we do get these requests back in and stuff, but the cities have got that, and we're more than willing to help them in any way they want to take some of this back.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there anyone here from the applicant? All right. Do you have anything you'd like to tell us?
Mr. President, Commissioner members, I just want to say thanks. We've been working with Dave, and it's been a pleasure. It's just a small piece. Wasserman Center is proposing an office there, and so we're going to redevelop that parking lot, and we thought we'd just kind of clean it up a little bit since it has the weird property line. So we appreciate the cooperation with the city.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Okay. Then, because this is a public hearing, is there anyone, Stacy, that would like to speak to us? Is there anyone here that would like to speak to us? I didn't have anyone on the list. So now, any desires to speak to us about this? The public hearing is now closed and the matter properly before the commission for a motion and a decision.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve resolution number 2362 for vacation of right-of-way of a parcel of land on South 8th Street, south of West River Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702, to the City of Boise.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll go into item number 2, which is the discussion about the Interagency Cooperative Development Agreement that we discussed a few moments ago, and Gary, our Deputy Director of Development and Technical Services, will illuminate us.
All right, Mr. President, Commissioners, for the record, Gary Inselman, Deputy Director of Development and Technical Services, here for a decision briefing on a interagency cooperative development agreement. At the request of the City of Meridian, district staff, city staff did look at options to try and accelerate the improvement of Lake Hazel Road from a quarter mile east of Locust Grove to a quarter mile west of Eagle Road. As you may know, the city is developing their Discovery Park, a regional park, about 70 acres in size on the south side of Lake Hazel Road in that area. Brighton has been developing land in that area and owns other land on the other side of the park. This commission approved a cooperative development agreement with them to develop the Lake Hazel and Locust Grove intersection, along with the extension of both roads a quarter mile in every direction. So that work is going on now, and this project would build that middle half mile of Lake Hazel Road between Locust Grove and Eagle. And in FY24, ACHD is programmed to improve the Eagle Lake Hazel Road intersection, along with Eagle Road from Amity to Lake Hazel. This is a vicinity map of the area. Every parcel of land along this mile of Lake Hazel has already been subdivided or is currently being subdivided and developed. Even though the aerial is not that old, nearly every house in this subdivision has already been built. And most of the homes in this subdivision are under construction right now. And this is the big development Apex that Brighton is developing. And the old turf farm is now the Lavender Hills subdivision, which is being currently built. Whoops. So the project would reconstruct and widen Lake Hazel Road Like I said, from a quarter mile east of Locust Grove to a quarter mile west of Eagle Road, it'd be a 5-lane section with 10-foot wide multi-use concrete pathways on both sides of the roadway. It would include a signalized intersection at the mid-mile collector. That collector will serve the Discovery Park, the future fire station from the city of Meridian, as well as their police substation that is planned at that corner. And this segment of Lake Hazel is in our capital improvements plan. The improvements are impact fee eligible, and Lake Hazel has been planned as the mobility arterial in our long-range plan through Compass for many years, if not decades. So here's the project limits. You can see the park here along half of the project. It's about a quarter mile in width and extends down about a half a mile. The subdivision's under development there. This, as I said before, this area's already been subdivided, homes built. And this is the location of that collector intersection that will be built as part of the project. All project costs will be reimbursable to Brighton for building this for us, with the exception of any administrative overhead costs that they have other than the construction manager's compensation, and does exclude any interest used on funds for the project or liquidated damages. The city will reimburse Brighton for any street lighting, the 10-foot multi-use path abutting their parcels, any treatment they want to put in buffer areas, conduit for their fiber optic lines, any city water and sewer line adjustments or extensions. And they have agreed to pay the construction manager's compensation, which is usually 3% of the project costs. I estimate our design right-of-way and construction costs about $2.5 million. These costs have been budgeted in the corridor preservation budget item in the FY22 budget. Brighton executed the cooperative development agreement a couple weeks ago. City of Meridian City Council approved it on consent on August 10th. And the CDA does provide that we will complete the extension of the bridge over the irrigation lateral by March 1st. And the remainder of the project will be completed by August 19th of 2022. And with that, I do recommend that Commission approve the agreement, and we would get the design underway immediately. So I'll send for any questions.
Mr. President, I just have, and maybe you know the answer to this, and it's probably not this one, but reading an article about their budget approval that just went through council, they have taken off a couple of fire stations. I'm assuming this is not one of them.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner May, I believe they left one fire station in, may have removed one or two. I don't know which was which. I haven't had time to look.
Okay. Yeah, I just read that and I just had that question. And then, Mr. Inselman, I was just curious, how much do we have in that corridor preservation fund? Do we have a...
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner May, I believe we're budgeting about $7 million next year because we have several agreements that you have adopted and planned. We generally budget about $2 million.
So $7 million, the balance in that, Mr. Daigle?
No.
Or Mr. Inselman?
Well, Mr. President, Commissioner
I know we
May,
have a large fund, so I was just curious how much money we
I
have.
think sometimes people confuse our corridor preservation program, which we budget annually, and the priority corridor reservation, which is completely separate.
I think that's what okay. All right.
Excuse me, Gary, just.
I'll circle back with that one later. Thank you, Mr. Daigle.
Mr. President, Commissioner May, in the workshop today, there'll be a presentation that will review those in detail with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Gary, it doesn't look like we're leaving any sidewalk gaps on this mile. Am I correct in that?
President Goldthorpe, you would be correct. We would have a continuous 10-foot multi-use pathway for the entire mile when we complete our intersection in 24.
Great.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Gary, is assuming the fire station is one of these that they're gonna put in, is that fire station gonna be off of the collector, or do you have any idea of where some of these amenities will be, or are those details kind of fleshed out in the design process?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, the city is designing that collector roadway now as their next phase of their park. This project will build it for the length of that parcel that is the fire station and police station. They will take access to the collector, and then they would go out through the signal to right or left on Lake Hazel Road when they need to leave the station.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes.
Yeah, Gary, thanks. This is great. And I understand how the reimbursable costs are done. Of course, we haven't set the 2022 budget yet, but this would obligate us to reimburse the roughly 2.5 million to the parties in the next fiscal year, right? And so we would basically lock in this in the budget that we're going to vote on next week.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, that's correct.
Yeah. So, do you know how this affects some of the other priorities that are listed in the CIP? I know there are others that aren't subject to development agreements.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, the reason we tried to work this out in the time frame that we have is to allow this to be built along knowing what we have programmed down the other corridors in the area in our 5-year work plan. If we can't make this window, it would probably be 8 to 10 years before we could get back to this segment with the other work that we have in the area, because we can't be working on multiple segments on the same corridor at the same time.
Right now, I guess my question really has to do with the analysis of the impacts of those. When we enter a cooperative development agreement and the developer can move on something fast, none of this happens in isolation. So what that does is it triggers demand to move faster on other projects that we aren't planning to move faster on. And so I want to know what that analysis has been, so that we know how when we put this corridor in, which there's a lot of demand for, because we need that, it's not really an expressway, but we need that alternative to Overland and the freeway going east and west. But I don't see an analysis of how that's going to impact both impact fee eligible projects and non-CIP projects.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, it's not going to impact the other projects based on the programming that we have in the draft 5-year plan and in the capital improvements plan. The demand in this area was driven by the city extending the sewer and water down to Locust Grove and Lake Hazel, which prompted the large Brighton development, which is developing all 4 corners very quickly. And then the subdivisions that the city has approved and are being built right now or are already built, if you go out there and look. And so that's what drove this demand for the other corridors. Your adopted priority corridors in this area is Eagle and then Lake Hazel to the east, clear over to Orchard, and then Orchard back up to the freeway, and then Maple Grove. As you know, we have those projects moving in various stages right now. We're under design of several of them, and they're programmed out in a sequential order so that they can be built without impacting each other and try and get these priority corridors done. This one kind of flagged late in the planning that we've already done down there, just because of where the city provided services first for areas west of Eagle Road and along that Locust Grove corridor. We already have Locust Grove from Overland to Victory. We're buying right-of-way right now. We're designing the Locust Grove and Amity intersection right now, so it's really not going to impact any of those or create a demand for us to improve any more in the area than that we've already planned.
I actually think that the increased demand by moving forward on this, the downstream demand further on Lake Hazel, because we aren't going to be finishing up the Orchard connection, basically inviting more people to use Lake Hazel as an east-west corridor rather than what they may currently be doing, going north of the freeway and then going east-west. They'll use Lake Hazel and then realize there isn't that expressway up Orchard yet. And so then they will turn and use 5 Mile, Eagle, Maple Grove. I just have that concern that we haven't done that analysis nor alerted those neighbors. And as you know, I don't think 5 Mile and Maple Grove should be used as expressways. That's the goal of the Orchard connection. So I just need to make the commission aware this demand will be induced by this project. It doesn't mean we shouldn't move forward and do it now, but we should be very open and frank, especially with the Southwest neighborhood and the Cole neighborhood. You can expect significantly more induced traffic along this corridor before the Orchard connection is made. And I think that's really very important. So I don't have a problem moving forward on this, and I understand this. And there's concerns always that, well, you mean you're reimbursing something here, and in fact, the one I was most concerned about with St. Luke's, they picked up the tab up front, but we're now reimbursing them. So all those costs still come from the taxpayers. And a portion of those are property taxes. I have it looks like we haven't got a specific design, but you indicated there's a mid-mile signalized intersection. And then it looks like just from there, the rest of the roads that enter it are offset, so they're not connected to each other. Are those right-in, right-outs? How will that be developed? Do we know, or is that something that will have to come to us? I assume they're going to have to be right-in, right-outs, given the function of Lake Hazel as a mini freeway.
President Goldberg, Commissioner Hanson, Lake Hazel really won't be a freeway, any freeway.
No, it won't, because there's too many stops along the way, yeah.
The adopted master street map, in working in conjunction with the city of Meridian, has a collector at the mid-mile south of Lake Hazel. It has a collector at the quarter mile south of Lake Hazel, and then
signalized?
No, that will not be signalized.
We
will have the local roads on the north side of Lake Hazel will be full movement intersections. There will be a center left turn lane along the whole corridor to be able to access those roadways, the collector roadways, and the other access points.
Yeah. No, I get that most of the traffic will go to Lake Hazel, and that's where the volumes will increase substantially, and we'll pretty much see pretty consistent levels of congestion on Lake Hazel, whether it goes to 5 lanes next year or 5 lanes in a couple of years. But I get that, because we don't have the connectivity other than those mid-mile collectors in the development pattern. So the development pattern is going to drive that. Is there a reason why we didn't consider roundabouts anywhere in this segment?
Well, President Goldberg, Commissioner Hanson, Lake Hazel and Locust Grove is a roundabout. It will be under construction within weeks.
But not at Eagle.
Eagle, there is a severe grade change there. We can't build a roundabout there. That's why.
Okay, and not at the mid-mile.
No, at the mid-mile, because it's a 3-legged intersection with the fire station, a signal is more appropriate. And we're actually building the intersection over the top of the bridge for the canal.
Okay.
That's where the canal crosses, right at that mid-mile. That's an existing bridge today.
So how are pedestrians and non-motorized movement back and forth from the neighborhoods on the north, the neighborhoods on the south, going to happen on those segments? Other than the signalized intersection, it looks like that's the only crosswalk that will exist. We're doing a great job doing the multi-use pathways on either side, but the crossings obviously will be significant for those neighborhoods.
President Goldberg, Commissioner Hanson, at this time there hasn't been, there's not enough information to determine if we need, say, a PHB somewhere else along the corridor, because the homes don't exist down here. The homes that exist here are only 5 large lot homes there. This development, you know, if they're going to the park and would come out right here, they can come out and get to the path and go over. If they wanted to cross over, they're close to Eagle Road, which then by 24, we would have the continuous improvements north up to the elementary, the YMCA, the library, all of those amenities as well. So, you know, the way this is developing out here, you know, the mid-mile intersection will serve these developments well to get across the road. If we need something in the future in another location, that will be determined based on the use and as this area develops out with the Apex subdivision.
Yeah. My understanding is of our new measurements for performance measures for pedestrian bicycle movement and level of stress is that we don't just assume what currently exists there. Just like with car traffic, we project out what may exist downstream and then apply those to the analysis. What kind of analysis have we done with respect to our performance measures that we're moving forward on this corridor?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, we haven't done the design yet. That will come with the approval of the agreement. We will meet those standards with the separation of the pathway from the travelway to get the desired level of traffic stress, but we have not tried to project pedestrian or bicycle activity. That's not part of those measures. We don't have any tools to try to project future use.
Yeah, I'd like us to do that so that we can accurately determine what costs and expectations are going to be placed on us. It's not just going along the corridor, but also people crossing back and forth. There's schools and destinations on either side. So we need to understand how that's going to affect what people are going to demand. And it would be great if that could have been contemplated in this cooperative development agreement, because there's there's a couple motivated parties, the City of Meridian and a developer, who are ready to start putting some of that infrastructure in. But what I hear we're saying is we'll get to that later, and then it would be not the developer or the city that does that, but ACHD would be 100% on the hook for those kind of facilities. So those are my concerns, Mr. President.
Let me just jump in a little bit. Just as a reminder, that ACHD has a positive account balance in the impact fee program. And most of the project costs here are related to impact fees and the reimbursement. So I'm not sure how much of an impact that'll have on the general revenue portion of the budget, but it will not be that much.
Yeah, no, I understand that. We have to spend the money if we've collected it, but there's also property tax, maintenance obligation, and as we have indicated, future obligations to build facilities to make sure that there are safe crossings.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments?
No, just thank you very much, Gary. Good information. Appreciate it.
And Stacy is waving her hand at me, and she's not just saying hi.
Mr. Don Kostelik would like to testify. Mr. Kostelik, if you just give me a second, I'm asking you to unmute, and you should be able to go. Name and address for the record, please.
Now, I have a question for Steve, and this isn't, don't anyone get me wrong on this. This was an item that was moved away from the consent agenda onto the regular agenda. Does it have to be a public hearing?
No.
Okay, then it is not. Thank you very much. The matter is now properly before the commission for discussion and a motion. Is there a reason that no one wants to make the motion to approve or disapprove the staff report or the development agreement?
Mr. President, I have no problem making a motion. I just would rather hear Mr. Kostelik's comments rather than just us kind of moving forward.
Is that the desire of the majority of the commission?
Mr. President, I think we should never be afraid to hear from the public.
There's no fear in this at all.
No, I'm fine with hearing. this.
Okay, then we will go ahead and hear from Mr. Kostelek. Go ahead, Don.
Is he still with us?
Yeah, I was waiting to be unmuted on that. Thank you, commissioners. And I think, Gary, in the answers, can you guys hear me okay? I see Commissioner Hanson with his cup here. My address is 3687 South Geckler Lane, Boise 83706. Again, Don Kostelek. The main thing, and Gary noted as you guys get into the design that I think I can hope be part of your decision, is the need that this have at least a 5-foot buffer from top of curb to the shared use pathway. And if there are sections or it does not, to have a vertical barrier. This is something I think most of you included in with my comments on the Southwest Area Study. And AASHTO that you cite frequently, including their bike guide in your traffic standards, says that if you don't have 5 feet of separation from the curb, you need a vertical barrier there. The road concepts in the Southwest Area Study did not show that, so I'm worried that'll get missed in this design if it's not there. Part of the reason is if you can think of a child riding against the flow of traffic only 3 feet from what'll probably be 40 mile an hour traffic. I don't know if this will be 45 miles an hour with ACHD calling it a mobility corridor, but 40's been the typical. Federal Highway Administration and AASHTO both say that a curb is not useful in deflecting a vehicle at speeds higher than 25 miles an hour, which is why that separation is needed. So my first comment was going to be on the cross section of this, but given that it's not under design yet, I can understand why they don't have those specifics. Second, I think a comment on agreeing with Commissioner Hanson, but I would relate it to, Commissioner Goldthorpe mentioned that there would be a completed sidewalk segment on this portion, which is great. In looking through your 5-year work plan that's online and in your budget, you have no plans and you have no funding program to fill gaps of sidewalks on existing widened arterials. In Boise, this would be Fairview, Franklin, Overland, Orchard, and Emerald. And there's nothing that is going to complete sidewalks on any of those corridors in any of your adopted or proposed programs today. Yet we're widening this road for motorists that won't exist until the year 2040. So that's where, while I understand the impact fee balance, to me the bigger policy issue is you still don't have anything to fill sidewalk gaps on arterials to counter this, which again, this could be taking, and other projects that are advanced could be taking money from in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Okay, is there anyone else that we need to hear from? No. All right, then the matter is appropriately before the commission for approval.
Mr. President, I move we adopt and approve the Interagency Cooperative Development Agreement as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll go on to
Thanks, Gary.
item number 3, which is the Cooperative Development Agreement for the Greendale Subdivision. And this will be from Bill Dahl.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and Commission. Bill Gall, Development Review Supervisor for the record. This is a decision briefing for a cooperative development agreement with Greendale Grove Properties for the construction of a portion of West Beacon Light from North Brandon Road to North Wing Road as a residential arterial, with 3 lanes and 10-foot concrete wide multi-use pathways on both sides in conjunction with their development of the Greendale subdivision. In this slide, you can see the Greendale subdivision is partially completed. It lies to the southwest of Beacon Light and Wing Road intersection, that 40-acre parcel there. we proposed the extension of beacon light through the center of their parcel and their development, and they are complying with that and proposing to construct beacon light through their property. In the 2020 capital improvements plan, this project was incorporated into the 2020 capital improvements plan to extend Beacon Light Road and widen it from Munger Road to Pollard Road. This project is kind of in the center of that, the new roadway for this section, and we construct a 3-lane roadway, a length of about 10,000 feet, and a total design and construction cost of about $9.5 million. The preliminary plat for Greendale Subdivision was approved by Commission on April 4th of 19 for 131 acres, 131 units on 40 acres, and site-specific conditions of approval do include this CDA if the project is included in the 2020 CIP, which it was. So this CDA basically is coming forward as a condition of approval to construct that section of roadway. The Cooperative Development Agreement before you today is for the construction of West Beacon Light Road from Brandon to North Wing, 3 lanes, 10-foot multi-use pathways on both sides. The project length is approximately 2,400 feet, and the estimated design and construction cost was about $1.5 million. This will be primarily impact funds. The project is estimated to be completed in April of 2022. All project costs before you are reimbursable, excluding the design and construction of the sidewalks that were required by the development. So essentially the pathway and sidewalk, we're widening that pathway from a 5-foot sidewalk to a 10-foot pathway. We'll split that price with them. And then street lighting, landscaping, utilities, and irrigation. So with that, staff recommends Commission approval of the Cooperative Development Agreement and authorize the President to execute the agreement on behalf of the district, and I will stand for any questions.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just a couple of the similar questions to what I asked Mr. Inselman about the once this connection has been made, a pretty strict connection, a critical connection has been made. Have we done an analysis of what the induced demand of those people then using Beacon Light to commute and its impact downstream?
I'm not aware that we have. This connection really is replacing New Hope and the up to Wing Road. If we go back,
right,
it's not really a new connection per se as much as it's
more convenient connection.
It's a more convenient connection.
Right. So I think that's a slightly different, but it's still a more convenient one. So, but we haven't done that. Are there roundabouts contemplated on either end of that, or
not that I'm aware of?
No, the development's not going to be doing those. And then crossings. My concern about crossings from one side of the neighborhood to the other.
It's a 3-lane section, and we do have the one intersection there. Crossings are proposed there, but nothing specific at this point. So
okay, yeah, I just want to highlight those. I think the same concern that I have with the others, especially with the speed of traffic that might be going along there, whether the buffer is sufficient. I didn't point this out, but I appreciated it on the last one, an analysis of the performance measures for bicycle and pedestrian uses may dictate some sort of physical protection if that is used as by people traveling much faster than they currently do, because it's going to be a lot more convenient. And of course the volumes will increase. So I know those design features aren't part of this, but ACHD will be responsible for paying for those, coming up with them and paying for them in the future. And I'd like to see that come to us so we know where those fall. This will be accelerated, but I'm not sure how quickly we can accelerate those when the need is there. Thank you.
Bill, is this still in the design phase?
They're completing design of this in conjunction with their next phase of the development.
Okay. Has there been any consideration in those, among other things, any vertical components to the multi-use pathway next to the road?
The multi-use pathway is separated by a significant distance.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Then the matter is before the commission for a motion and discussion.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the Cooperative Development Agreement, Greendale Subdivision Extension of West Beacon Light Road.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. That ends our regular agenda. We do have our public communications portion. Is there anyone here or on Zoom that would like to address us? Nope, there's not. In that case, the meeting is adjourned and we'll get ready for our work sessions and take a 5-minute break.
Okay. Thanks, Jane.
our first work session today is on multi-use pathways. And we've had some discussion about what we want to hear and why this is necessary. And so without further ado, take it away, Gary.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe. For the record, again, Gary Enselman, Deputy Director of Development and Technical Services. So this is an information briefing on multi-use pathways. Very quick background, as you know, at the Fairview Locust Grove intersection project, we began the effort to look at other options to on-street bicycle lanes. The commission required a revision to raised bike lanes and directed staff to look at modifying other designs to remove the on-street bike lanes and arterials. We engaged a consultant, Kittleson Associates, to assist us with standard drawings for the raised bike lanes and multi-use pathways to address the different situations on just standard details, as well as what do you do at driveways and intersections. And Evan with Kittleson Associates is here today, and Dale Caparis, our district engineer who was leading that effort, is here, as well as Sean Martin, our traffic manager. So looking at AASHTO and multi-use pathways, they raise several potential conflicts with them that motorists often do not notice: out of direction bikes from the normal flow of traffic, the speeds of bikes. Now we have scooters and e-bikes that go at much faster speeds than some standard cyclists. Vehicles blocking the side street crossing waiting to enter the main road, and attempts to require bicyclists to stop or yield are typically not effective. Their list goes on that bicyclists on side paths are not in the normal scanning area of drivers, that even with good access control and limited side streets and driveways, the remaining crossings can lead to crashes, and that traffic control devices have been shown to be ineffective in changing driver or path user behavior. And for those reasons, AASHTO typically recommends that you look at other bike facilities, which is typically on-street bike lanes. Obviously, that's not the direction we've been given, so we were looking at how do we make a facility that is safe and appropriate for all users as directed by the commission. So kind of a visual of some of the AASHTO concerns. In the first square, driver A is looking for traffic to the left. The contraflow cyclist is not in their field of view. The middle, driver B is looking for traffic ahead, and again, the contraflow cyclist is not in the field of view. Or in the last one, driver C is looking for turning traffic on the main road and traffic on the minor road, and the cyclist that's riding in the direction of traffic is not in the field of view. The Oregon DOT has this figure that shows the potential 10 conflict points with multi-use pathways at intersections.
Gary?
So, yes, sir.
Is that Oregon diagram similar to what the concerns were from some of the city council in Meridian for the design there at, was it Zalvia and Eagle Road?
I think, no.
No, okay.
This diagram is the reason for the design we were doing on Eagle Road, and I'll explain that in the coming slides. There was a study from the National Center for Biotechnology, Information, and National Library for Medicine, very long title. It is a U.S. government agency. They studied 20 years of crash and injury data from Montreal. And what they found is that typical engineering guidance in the United States has discouraged bicycle facilities that resemble cycle tracks, including parallel side paths or the multi-use paths that we're discussing, and sidewalk bikeways, suggesting that these facilities and cycle tracks are more dangerous than bicycling on the street. What this study found is that the data suggests that the injury risk of bicycling on cycle tracks and side paths is less than biking in the street, and that the accident probability also decreased at intersections where the cycle track or side paths approaches are deflected between 2 and 5 meters away from the main roadway. So what they mean by that is illustrated here in the planning and design guide from the Massachusetts DOT, where you see the side path is recessed away from the intersection a certain distance and crosses back here. And the highlighted section is, that's similar to roundabouts. A recessed crossing can reduce conflicts at crossing and places the crossing in the driver's field of view, which is straight ahead of the vehicle because they've already made that maneuver onto the side street. This is a diagram out of the Michigan DOT. You can see they're recommending the same thing with different options depending on the circumstances, which we'll get into with our proposed details as well. And then again, this is from Hampshire County, which is in Massachusetts. Their complete streets design manual, and again, recommendations for the crossing treatments will vary by site depending on the pathway facility, the roadway with number of lanes, speeds, etc. So Kittleson has worked up some design details for us on the Maltese Pathways and the raised bike lanes. We're talking about the Maltese Pathways today. You can see at the bottom of this page, we do have the reference to our level of traffic stress and the various, what that would be for the various number of travel lanes and the buffer width. Didn't get a chance to address the prior questions on the buffer widths on Lake Hazel and Beacon Light, but our standard right-of-way that we preserve through development with our typical street sections allows an 8-foot buffer. At a signalized intersection, the crossing for the Maltese Pathway will be controlled by the signal. So you can see, you can't really see the signal pole in this example, but this would be for a signalized intersection, and it would basically be the 10-foot wide crossing with the ped ramp to the width of the pathway.
Gary, I appreciate that because I wasn't quite sure if there was going to be an intersection, like a signalized intersection at some of these. Are they going to be at all of the crossings or only certain sized ones? Because there would be a lot of crossings.
Yeah, President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, the signalized intersections would typically be at the arterial intersections and the collector intersections that warrant signal control. We may have roundabouts at some of those collector intersections as well, but we typically would not signalize a minor side street intersection with the arterial just for the ped crossing or the Maltese Path crossing.
Do you have any idea of how many non-signalized crossings there would be, potentially?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, that will vary by corridor. Under our typical access control, we would look at having a mid-mile collector. You might have a local street at the quarter mile. You could have some driveways in between there, depending on the land uses, or if there were other streets already there from past development that we have to accommodate. So it will vary by street.
Okay, thank you.
At a roundabout, it will look just like our crossings do at roundabouts, only again, the pathways, if they're 10 feet, then the crossings will be 10 feet wide as well. And you can see, as suggested in the Massachusetts DOT thing, as you're going around the roundabout, when you get to that crossing, it is in your field of view directly in front of the vehicle. So for the side street intersections, this one is for speed on the arterial of 40 to 45 miles an hour. It does recommend that crossing be set back a little further. That allows for those cars to make that movement, and the people in that crossing are in the field of view of the driver. The driver's they're slowing down as they go around. Without the bicycle lanes on the arterial, you will see cars making that turn a little slower. We can make a smaller radius diameter of that corner to make them slow down a little more. And as you can see on the right, in certain situations, perhaps a raised crossing would be appropriate. As authorized by the emergency services, we have to coordinate with them as well on things like that. But there are different treatments available for a given situation. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all.
So this one on the left is more similar to the one on Zalvia and Eagle?
President Goldthorpe, that's correct.
So as you've described and as it looks to me, the drivers on, in this case, Eagle Road, are going to be able to see the vehicle on Zalvia easier than if we had the multi-use pathway further to the left, and the car would have to be back further, correct?
President Goldthorpe, correct.
Okay, because it also looks to me like the drivers will be able to see the pedestrians or bicyclists much easier than if they had to worry about both the Eagle Road traffic, the Zalvia traffic, and the pedestrian bike traffic simultaneously, correct?
President Goldthorpe, that's the idea.
Hey, just checking, Thank you.
Zalvia is actually the roundabout, but the other side streets on Eagle Road on that project would look like this, or as close to this as we got it, because we didn't have these when we started construction.
Yes, okay, thank you. Well, I'm sorry for that mistake on the road. I just know which one it is in my mind because I've seen it so many times.
Right.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you, Gary. I'm just wondering though, as someone that drives, never walks on Eagle Road, and then I've seen it at dusk, I've seen it during the day. I think lighting is a huge concern with any intersection, but especially this. I've seen in Eagle Road that there's not all of these types of buffered, pushed out crossings. People can be in them, but cars are just so focused on looking out for cars, and they're still going so fast that even if they do see them, once they turn, it's too late because they're going so fast. And so I think I'm still concerned that some of those things, like the accounting for human error and people moving too fast, as we've seen consistently continuing to go up and up and up in our community, I worry about all these other elements that you've described, that it's not one size fits all, right? And there we can do things with the radius, we can do things with this, but none of it really seems like it's locked solid to address those bigger concerns that I've seen consistently happen, and I'm just a little concerned about. Do you have any other thoughts on that bit at all?
President Goldberg, Commissioner Pickering, what we are attempting to do is make a facility that's as safe as possible for all users. As we saw in some of the earlier slides, if we have the crossing right up next to the curb, then you're introducing a lot more for the driver and the path users to be able to require them to try to watch out for, and we know by experience that many of them don't.
Right.
So this is to provide as safe a crossing as possible and eliminate some of those potential conflict points, and get the pathway users in the driver's field of view so that they can see them and make the appropriate actions.
Well, then I have another question. I'm sorry I missed the first few minutes of your presentation, but can you provide any context for just how the kerfluffle between the city of Meridian and their staff being concerned about just this design protocol? Can you just walk me through just the timeline of events and just the standards that we go through? It's like we do this and then this, and we presented this design, and can you just walk me through just the sequence of events as somebody that wasn't familiar with them?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, I'm not sure I'm familiar with all of them myself. I was not directly involved with this project. However, we did have a design. We were directed to change it very quickly before construction, and so there probably wasn't maybe as much notice as the city may have desired. They have people on the team. Their staff certainly knew what was being designed and proposed. How that gets conveyed to their elected leadership is between them, so we can't really speak to that. And there was a presentation by a member of their transportation committee, I believe,
right,
that you were all forwarded, that we believe presented things in a very conflicting manner, where part of it would advocate for exactly what we're showing you, and part of it would advocate for an AASHTO design, which would tell you to put the bike lanes on the street, which you've told us not to do.
Right.
So we're trying to follow your direction and make it as safe as possible for all users so that it gets used and doesn't, sit there.
Exactly.
So that's where we're at. This is fairly new. Most of the drawings I showed you and what we can find for studies are within the last 3-4 years. So as we gain experience and the industry gains experience across the country, I'm sure we'll be making some adjustments to, hone our best practices and make sure that it's the safest facility for all users.
So Gary, did I hear you correctly? So we had coordinated with the City of Meridian staff about the design, and then something changed, or who requested the change in design? You mentioned somebody asked for a change.
No, we were following the commission direction for what to do on the arterials, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
The city always has a staff member on our project teams if they desire, and they were on this team. They were communicated the designs, as I understand it. It's just, I think a few of the council members didn't understand it or just didn't like the way it looked.
Okay, thank you. That helps. And is there any, because again, I'm just curious on, like I mentioned, like the lighting and a lot of those elements that go back to the city and those types of things. What are the tools that we have to communicate to them that, to your point, we want this to be used, we want this to be of value to the constituents? How can we convey that to them that this investment will be used more if you make the line of sight a lot more simpler and put in lighting? Like how, aside from just sending them a letter, are there any other tools that we can use to implore those types of design features that are on their side?
President Goldberg, Commissioner Pickering, we do light the intersections. We do light the crossings on our projects. It's if there's continuous street lighting wanted along the arterial that isn't necessary for traffic safety, then that would be on the city to provide. We would provide street lighting here, and then after the project is completed, then they would maintain that.
And on the radius side of things, what's the process to tighten up the radius of the curve there? Of the curb? Yeah.
Those would be corridor and street and circumstances specific. We would look at that with each individual project and intersection, depending on the land use, the context, what is the side street, what's the main arterial, so that we would have the appropriate radius.
Okay, and so that would be a staff conversation?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have another drawing here for if the arterial is going to be at 35 miles per hour or less. The offset of that crossing is a little less. But with the slower speeds, we still achieve the benefits of having that recessed a bit and the safety aspects that we discussed. So the advantages of the setback crossings, that seems to be the gist of the concerns. We do remove the right turning vehicle conflicts at the crossings, remove the conflict from the left turning vehicles, the bicyclists and other users, because it does swing out of the way, but they do need to slow down some approaching the crossing, because that's one of the bigger concerns is with the really high rate of speed on some of these vehicles, particularly with now the scooters and e-bikes. The drivers just can't expect someone to be getting there that quickly, so it does make them slow down. It does allow the vehicles on the side street to yield at the pedestrian bike crossing, then pull up and look for gaps in the traffic and keep them out of the crossing while they're doing that. And we believe this does provide a safer street crossing for all users, because that is the primary objective that we've received from you.
Well, and Gary, to that point too, I mean, I obviously do not know what's best in terms of continuous lighting along a corridor and under which circumstances, right? But to your point about things are moving, like certain users can approach an intersection a lot faster than some. So my thought was, again, I wasn't very clear, is, you know, the intersection might be lighted, but is it appropriate to have additional, like a few lights as you're approaching it, just so people can see as you're coming in a little bit? So again, it's not continuous, but obviously I understand there's context within all of these different intersections, but that was my main plug there.
Right, and President Goldberg, Commissioner Pickering, if the lighting is specifically for the pedestrians, just because the city wants continuous lighting, which Meridian generally does, they're requiring it as subdivisions develop. Their continuous lighting is put in behind, by the sidewalks. That would be a discussion with the city and put in as part of a cost share agreement if it's additional than what's required for traffic safety at the intersections or along the corridor.
Thanks, Gary.
And we work well with them to get that done.
Okay.
Lastly, I would just conclude that, we are designing the facilities for all users as directed. We're designing the facilities to fit the environment, the site-specific conditions that are present in the land uses in the context of the roadways and the pathways. Design details, we have gone to the PAG and the BAC. Early on, it was primarily with the raised bike lanes, because that was the focus that we were on then. We've shifted to the multi-use pathways, so Dale will be going to the PAG, I believe, tomorrow, and the BAC next month to show them these final draft documents again. And we will be using these to advance our current design projects. And so I'd stand for any questions you may have.
I have one last one myself, but on the recessed crossing where a vehicle can move up and stop before they make the right turn, are we going to have any landscaping requirements so that there's plenty of field of view on the bicycle path so that the drivers won't have any problem recognizing a pedestrian or bicycle coming?
President Goldthorpe, yes, we need to make sure that there's clear field of vision to be able to see them as they're approaching that crossing.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I think this is tremendously helpful, and look forward to the feedback from the advisory groups. The model of moving forward on new roadways, new intersections, new developments, that's great. Of course, there's an enormous number that have been badly designed, and we're trying to figure that out. The other is that I've noticed there's always some unique character that also needs to be taken into consideration. And in general, those free running right turns were, a generation ago, we thought, let's just make it as easy to turn right as possible, basically inviting drivers not to look while they're turning. But there's ways in which we can eliminate those. And can we use this? I'd like to see this used, incorporated into the projects we are putting into the 5-year work plan to say, and here's for example, on this area we want to do a project on, a sidewalk, or there's a free running right turn or a right turn that really we would never allow now. Let's do something on that. Can we use this to retrofit a lot of these places where it's not safe and where people then avoid walking and biking in that particular area?
President Goldberg, Commissioner Hanson, I believe anytime we are designing a project that has a feature like you're describing, we would evaluate if it's still appropriate. What do we do about it? Is there a crash history or other issues? I mean, those really aren't the types of facilities that we want to have any longer, because they do create more problems than they solve.
Yeah, and I would say we have to actually move out and look at the context in which people are approaching that particular area. It's kind of like, okay, it's not just an intersection. There's a free running right turn, or a right turn that really we would never allow now. Let's do something on that. Can we use this to retrofit a lot of these places where it's not safe and where people then avoid walking and biking in that particular area?
President Goldberg, Commissioner Hanson, I believe anytime we are designing a project that has a feature like you're describing, we would evaluate if it's still appropriate. What do we do about it? Is there a crash history or other issues? I mean, those really aren't the types of facilities that we want to have any longer, because they do create more problems than they solve.
Yeah, and I would say we have to actually move out and look at the context in which people are approaching that particular area. It's kind of like, okay, it's not just an intersection. You indicated that there's a difference if you're looking at an arterial that's set for 35 miles an hour as opposed to an arterial that's set for 50. But if the arterial is set for 35, but in non-peak hours people are perfectly comfortable going 50, then we don't want to design something for 35, even though it says 35, because in fact that's not the condition on the ground. But what we have to do is address what do we do to that arterial to make sure that the design is consistent with what we want people to do speed-wise. And so it may be further back, much further into the stream where the drivers are approaching the intersection, so that they're where they can't get up to those speeds. And I would suggest this is a perfect way of testing all of these with temporary installations, because we can make corners sharper with temporary installations. We can move with asphalt crossings, without spending money on new concrete. So there's a lot of things we can do with temporary installations, test them and see, okay, is this working? Before we say, okay, let's come up with a new design for this and, wait for 5 years while it finally gets up. And then we build it and we find out, we should have tested some of these things beforehand. There's a lot too, as you know. I have a heartache, and you've heard me say this about diagonal pedestrian crossings, because that's another one which then tells pedestrians and cyclists too, go right out into the intersection. And we have to eliminate a ton of those. There's a huge number of those, and I still am surprised at some of them getting built. One thing that is suggested, especially with the multi-use pathways along these, where people are not aware there's going to be a crossing coming up. They have to be aware, drivers, that they're going to be seeing these other people, vulnerable road users, that they can prevent a right turn where there would be a right turn if there was no one there. That we can have them signal a no right on red. And I've seen those. So that's a logical, easy one that doesn't require much. People are used to a right on red, and then boom, as soon as somebody pushes that button, that then forces the driver to say, why can't I turn right on? Oh, there's somebody there. As opposed to they're used to turning right without having to look. Oh, there's somebody actually there. So those would be I want to make sure those get incorporated into it. And especially the notion that they sort of get deeper into each one of the projects that we're using. Raised crossings are another one. If they're not a huge raise, a way of alerting a driver that they're approaching a crossing, an area where there are some conflicts. As soon as you drive up over this little table type thing, it's, oh, okay. It's much like they do on the newer roundabouts. Forces you to slow down.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Gary, I just really appreciate your presentation and your hard work and the staff's work on this. I was just curious, what are the next steps for communicating this with the City of Meridian and their staff? Is there anything at all that we need to communicate to them?
Knowing that they're concerned about these for Locust Grove.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah, we can, we'll be reaching out to them as well with that design, what we're doing. That's another one where it's kind of it's not quite gonna fit everything that we discussed here today, just because of where it was in the process and the right-of-way that was available, but we'll make the best fit that we can with where we're at in the project.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have another work session, which is on our budget process, and we've got like 2 handoffs before we get to the main event. And first one will be from Steve.
Commissioners, for the record, Steve Price, General Counsel. If you recall, the commission requested that that we present to the commission the rules of engagement on our cash reserve in the way that the district reports the cash reserve. And then after that, the Treasurer, Sherman Pisco, will be providing a current view of the cash reserve accounts that the district currently has. And then you guys can get into your budget discussions. Sherman?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Commissioners. For the record, Sherwin Pesca, Treasurer. So I'm here today to present to you Kristen Diggs. She's I. Bailey partner. I. Bailey is the firm that is responsible for conducting our annual audits. Most of you have been Kristen in the past. She's been doing our audits for many, many years. So with that, here's Kristen.
All right. President Goldthorpe, Commissioners, thanks for the opportunity to come before you today. Management has asked me to kind of go through the breakouts in fund balance because it sounds like there's a little bit of confusion. So I just kind of gonna go through what the accounting standard says and then kind of break it down and hopefully provide it in details. If not, takes the accounting part out of it. Do I just click that? Oh, sweet. Okay. So on your general fund balance sheet, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. We're not seeing it on the Zoom, the slide on the Zoom side of things, Ken.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. Nope. Just a gray screen. Thank you.
All right. So there's 5 different components when you look at the general fund balance sheet that you see year over year in audited financial statements. The first component is your non-spendable fund balance. And so these are the amounts that they're not readily available. They're assets that are wrapped up, that are not in spendable form. So it's your inventory, your prepaid amounts. If you happen to have any long-term note receivables, those are the amounts that show up in the non-spendable fund balance. You also have a restricted component to your fund balance, and these are amounts that are externally restricted. They may be restricted by, if there's bonds that are issued by ordinance, some kind of external restriction places it on that component of the fund balance. You have your committed fund balance, and so these are amounts that are to be used for specific purposes. These are amounts where a formal action of the government's highest level of decision-making authority, so the commissioners through a resolution or some other form, they decide to put some kind of constraint on the funds. The only way to relieve the committed fund balance is for an additional resolution relieving that. The other piece of it is an assigned fund balance. This is amounts that are to be used for specific purposes. The constraints are not required to be made by a formal resolution by the commissioner, such as yourself. They are allowed to be made by someone who's been designated to make that assignment. And then your unrestricted is everything else. Okay.
So I have a quick question then. I don't know if you were observing our earlier discussion. We've entered into cooperative development agreements that are basically committed funds that we have or will have, and by contract, we have to spend them. So would that be perceived as a restricted fund? How would that be? Because we can't not spend that money. We've already pre-committed before we adopt the budget to spending that money on those specific agreements. It's a little like a loan agreement. You have to pay back the loan before you can spend it on other stuff. How would you describe those?
That's going to be determined what kind of revenue that you're going to use to pay for it. So if it's for a future, budget item, so if it's going to be used from tax dollars for the next year, and that's when the expenditure is going to go through, there's no need to restrict or commit or assign those funds. If it's to be used with the current resources that you guys have in place, the cash that you have, investments, anything like that, if that's going to be used to fund that project, then that's where you would
So
commit
it's
or
actually
assign it.
both, because the impact fee funds are already there and collected, but we have to use property taxes as well, which we are continuing to collect. So
But your impact fees
the
right
mix-
now,
it's going to be a mix of both of those type of funds.
yep, so your impact fees right now are sitting in your restricted fund balance, because those are restricted by ordinance.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And,
Yep.
and does it, are the matching property taxes also restricted in that fund?
No.
No, so, but we still are obligated to spend those property taxes because we've already committed to spending. So we actually have restricted those property taxes in a way, but it's described differently.
Yeah, again, your restricted is tied to an outside restriction.
Okay.
Okay. So for best practices, as you guys are working through your budget process and in trying to establish, how much is going to be committed, the assigned piece of it and all of that, the GFOA, which is the Government Finance and Officers Association, it's a group of about 20,000 individuals from government organizations all over the United States. And basically what their recommendation is, you should have a minimum in your unrestricted fund balance of 2 months of either your revenue or your expenditures, whichever is more stable. Okay. But they also caution that you need to look at it and see if you have different elements where the predictability of it it's not a constant revenue source, or if you don't have constant expenditures, if it could spike in any given year, like Snowmageddon a couple years ago, those particular situations, you want to be able to have a little bit more in your fund balance on what's left over, just because you need to be able to have the funds to help cover those expenditures. So you need to look at the predictability of your revenues. You need to look at what your current commitments and assignments are that you have for those funds. What, if there's any kind of drain on other funds that you're helping to fund with the general fund, and then any perceived exposure to significant one-time outlays. So any big expenditures, like Snowmageddon or something like that. So with that, are there any additional questions?
We'll have a few dollars and cents questions for Sherwin.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mary, I know you had something specific going on in your mind when you were asking for some of this information.
Yeah.
Did it have anything to do with our balances?
No, well, the cash reserve,
Yes,
asking about
We'll
that.
talk about that.
It's good to have it for the record that there is not a law, that it's a recommendation and a guideline from a professional organization. So I'm glad that's been stated here for the record. What is 1 month of operating expense for us?
Well, it depends on the revenue or expenditure for the upcoming year. So it continues to change. So it depends. I'll show you in the presentation here as to what.
Okay, because I've got some questions, because
Sure.
in my mind, the numbers aren't quite
Okay.
matching up. And, so it was mentioned that when they do the audit, if we don't have the cash reserve set aside, that we can take a hit for bonding. That's something that we don't do, that we are not authorized to do that. So obviously they look for that. So where in our budget are these funds
I'll show you here in a
indicated?
second.
Okay. And then we'll go into the numbers.
All right.
All right.
It's always a challenge.
There we go.
Can you see that in your, okay. So this right here is just a copy or a section of our most recent audited financial statements, which was as of September 30th last year. We don't prepare financial statements until the end of the fiscal year. So for discussion purposes, we're using the last audited financial data. Okay, so this section right here, it's broken out into the top section, which shows the fund balances, and then the bottom section, which is the calculation for the GFOA recommended fund balance. So based on September 30th, 2020, I'd like to point out to you the section that says assigned. So when we talked about reserve fund balances, it's really that section there where it's identified as assigned. So you'll see you have assigned dollars for encumbrances, right-of-way acquisitions. Commissioner Hanson, you had talked about development cooperative agreements. So that development cooperative agreement for $7.3 million, that's for a St. Luke's agreement for the infrastructure improvements that we have to pay back over 5 years.
So just
Yes.
so that will go up to about 10 million based upon the new cooperative, because the St. Luke one still goes on for a number of years. So that number is going to be a lot higher in the new budget.
It's possible. This particular amount is specifically on the agreement that says we have to pay the cost of the improvements over 5 years. So
Right.
it's split out over 5 years.
Right.
So we're using current resources to identify that amount that we owe. Okay. And then we also assign funds for self-insurance program. As you know, we are self-insured. So if we take a major hit on liability for 1 year, we may have to tap into that self-insurance reservation. Okay, and then the last one is money that we have set aside for priority corridor projects. So as an example, the Linder portion from Chinden to State Street, there are 5 major bridges that would have to be replaced. So that alone is approximately $45 million. So that's why we have set aside some funds there, because some of those projects are unfunded. So if you decide that you want to reduce the amount that we have currently reserved, you can certainly do that. And that would probably be the line item that would need to be adjusted. Okay. And then going down to the bottom is the calculation that I use. So as Kristen indicated, it depends on which one is larger or more stable. So in this case, the expenditure budget for FY21 is $133 million. So 2 months worth is $22 million. And as you can see, the unassigned fund balance is $26 million. So in this case, we have met the minimum requirement. Any questions?
Yeah, Sherwin, last year we talked about, I believe it was setting aside $6 million for facilities.
Yes.
Where would that go?
Unfortunately, we had to take that out because we wanted to maintain the minimum fund balance right here. So right now it's only at 2.4 months. So we took that out. So had we had enough unassigned fund balance available, we could have put up to $6 million back in there.
Okay. Or if we wanted to put the $6 million in there, we could take it from the priority corridor fund, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. President.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Sherwin, can you better define, you took it out? Like, what do you mean you took the $6 million out? Did you put it in a different bucket, or?
No. Okay, so Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, so it's just identifying the funds that are part of the fund balance. So it's really book entry, financial statement entry. So if, as Commissioner or Mr. President indicated, we could have taken $6 million out of the $25 million that we've identified for a priority corridor. That would have been a separate line item on the report. But that's all it is. It's presentation purposes only.
another example, several years ago, we had, I believe, something like 15 million for facilities here at Adams, and that the commission said to spend elsewhere, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So at one time, we did have a reservation for facilities, as you've indicated, but we have since taken that out and placed Priority Corridor as a higher priority of reservation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, this is really helpful, Sherwin. Thank you very much for taking the time to put all this together for us. I do have a question as far as our operational expenses, because it was explained that we need to keep this balance for operational expenses in the cash reserve. So in our option for budget that we are looking at that has been posted, our operational expenses are listed. They went up from when we had the entire 24% to 73,083,000. So to get to that 126, I had it at 126,720. Then there's capital expenses in there. So when we're saying we need to have this cash reserve for operational expenses, I'm thinking keeping the lights on and paying our people. So you are defining it then, operating expenses include capital improvement projects?
Mr. President, Commissioner Mee, yes, that's correct. So when we talk about to cover 2 months worth of expenses, we're talking about everything. So on a budget of 150 million, you take 2/12 of that, and that's what we would need for as far as the GFYA recommended balance for the upcoming fiscal year. So just to explain it in simple terms, what causes the fund balance? What causes the fund balance to increase is when revenues exceed expenditures.
Right.
Okay. So when expenditures is higher than revenues, fund balance will decrease, and therefore the amount that we have to work with for the minimum balance to keep in our account becomes a challenge, basically. So as you know, for next year, I believe in our budget, we show that we're expending more than what we are receiving. So we're having to use some of our fund balance out of our reserves.
Okay, so and to the representative from I. Bailey, that is usually when you have operational expenses, it includes capital projects, etc., not just, okay. That's really clarifying and helpful to know there. So then using that 126,720,000, our monthly expenses are about 10 million, like 10.5 million.
Sure.
Okay. And so where, is there a place in our budget that we have these things lined out without having to go in and pick apart and look for things and look at our different projects?
This presentation here is not part of the budget, but Christine and I do have discussions as to how much is available that she can use for the upcoming budget.
I just think it would be helpful. I just feel like we kind of happened on some of these additional dollars that are out there and understanding why they are set aside. So I think that somehow this needs to be part of our budget process so that we're aware of what's out there. So if we could do that, I think that would be really, really helpful.
Mr. President, Commissioners, as you know, at the end of each fiscal year, through the audit process, the auditors will present to you what the outcome is of the audit. Maybe at that time, I can also present to you what the fund balance looks like.
I think that would
you
be
have
helpful.
A starting point for the next year's budget.
Like I say, I think it's been very clarifying to see this broken down, and we don't usually have that as part of our notebook when we're going through everything. So I think it's beneficial for us to be aware of everything that's out there so that we can understand going forward. So if we could do that, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank
So
you, Sherwin.
Sherwin, because we're possibly running a deficit based on expenses and revenues, is that the reason we got the several pages a few weeks ago that showed the possible impact of deferring or eliminating projects with the budget that we were possibly going to have, or budget certification. Oh, here he comes.
Okay. And I do have a couple questions for Justin before we're done too, so I'm glad he's here.
Mr. President, members of the commission, Justin Lucas, I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management. So yes, as part of your option discussion, we provided you with a list of projects that could be potentially delayed or deferred. Not all of those delays or defers occur within the 2-year budget. Those delays or deferred were projected over the life of the integrated 5-year work plan, which is the 5 years. So it's not like all of those projects were immediately pushed out of the budget. It was more of a projection, because every time you make a decision on revenue, your decision is compounded over, years going forward, especially your decision related to property taxes. And so when we're doing the integrated 5-year work plan, we have to take that. It's not just a 1-year reduction. That reduction is compounded over multiple years. So we have to take that difference, whether it's an increase or a reduction, and provide you with what we believe is a reasonable amount of projects that we can accomplish with the budget that we are provided. We, though, even with those delays and deferrals, we still include a certain amount of over-programming in the integrated 5-year work plan. At the commission's direction, we've tried to keep projects going forward with design and right-of-way so they could potentially become shelf projects that if revenues become available, we then have something to go build. If we're not able to do that, and we've been in this situation many times, revenue may become available, but we don't have a shelf-ready project to spend that revenue. So it's a balancing act. It's an art and a science to try and find the right amount of projects to fit in there that's reasonable. We could program every project in the world, but if there's no revenue to accomplish those projects, then it doesn't really mean anything, and we do want to make the plan meaningful.
Well, you talk about this more than we do, but so these shelf projects or shovel-ready projects, in your mind, are they looking like it's more important to have more of those as we look at what might be coming down the road from these the new budget funds that might be approved by the federal government?
Mr. President, members of the commission, in my professional opinion, I think it's very wise for ACHD to have shelf projects, especially looking at the national conversation related to infrastructure as a whole. Now, we don't
better than I do.
We don't exactly know how those funds will be distributed once they're distributed to the states, and then the state distributes it to the locals, and all the formulas and the things that happen there. But in previous large stimulus packages or infrastructure packages, ACHD has realized quite a bit of funding. And if we're ready and we have projects ready, it's a lot easier for us to either go after those funds competitively or to go out and build projects. The most recent project that we have been working on at the commission's direction is the 5-mile overpass, and we've been preparing that project, trying to get that project ready for federal funding, knowing that it could be a really good candidate for a potential influx of funding through Compass.
So, Mr. President, Justin, while you're at it, so isn't that sort of the purpose of our priority list anyway? Because it tells us what could move up. If a project, for example, we've seen this in the past when the engineer's estimates, are way too low and we had to spend a lot more, that just sort of had an impact on those of lower priority, and they moved down. But we also have the same thing where we actually have some revenue, and I appreciate the President Goldthorpe pushing on this, saying when we have additional revenue we didn't anticipate from the savings on some of these projects, we know from the priority list what's going to move up. So that's all function of the priority list, right?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, yes, it's certainly one of the functions is to inform as projects are being brought into the plan and brought forward to the commission. The priority list is intended to inform that decision. Now, to be clear though, when we get into that budget year, within 3 years, typically the priorities for projects that we're looking at that soon are relatively close to each other. And so then often it becomes a function of project readiness. Do we have the right of way? Are we ready to go? So there's a balance between those two things.
Right, that makes sense.
And it seems to me that's where our focus should be, and not, there's a perception that, well, if we don't have these revenues, these projects get dropped off. And it just like, why wouldn't it be all the same list? Because as you go further out into the future, it's a priority list. And we've had input from our fellow stakeholders saying these are the priorities. Now the numbers are going to vary from a wide range of numbers, from being something, tens of thousands of dollars as opposed to a multi-million dollars, but it's still a priority list. So that as we decide what that revenue is, and we make in fact adjustments mid-year to those revenue levels, we already know. But that if we want to move something out of sequence and move it ahead further, perhaps because it's smaller, perhaps because it's close to another project, that's where the commission should come in and say, yeah, I want to move that out of a priority that we had already agreed is, and this is why. So we can go back and tell the people we represent, your project's a project that was lower priority than the one in your neighborhood is going to go ahead of you, and there's why, and this is the justification. So that it becomes clearer that we're in the driver's seat on setting priorities and then readjusting priorities as financial circumstances will always change. Does that make sense? Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I think the commission is in the driver's seat. Through the adoption of your budget and the integrated 5-year work plan, you have every opportunity to indicate which projects ACHD should be moving forward on and which projects should potentially be delayed. I would clarify that the prioritization list, we have different categories of projects, community programs, roadway and intersection projects, and historically we have used different prioritization methodologies to rank those different types of projects, because cross-prioritizing has proven to be a challenge, not just for ACHD, but across the nation between different types of projects, because the benefits can be measured differently. That being said, I think it's important to understand that some projects are constrained by funding type also. Certainly roadway and intersections, because they are able to access the impact fee program and those revenues. It's not as simple as just moving one thing for another. There are some strings attached to certain project types based on the funding source.
Yeah, and I would argue it's complex, but it's so important that we not have a category that is perceived as getting it off the top, and that we actually fully integrate the prioritization. And then as we move things, because of constrained funding sources, we have a reason to explain why this project can move up, because those funds are available, and funds for projects that might be ahead of it are not. I think that's a much more prudent way to approach the way in which we obligate tax dollars, but also in terms of the way in which we obligate future maintenance of that infrastructure in the future. We're saying by our priority list, these are not only important, they're at the top of the list, but they are so important that in perpetuity, future taxpayers, you have to pay to maintain them. And so and that's why I think it's so critical, and I would encourage the commission to push towards a fully integrated prioritization list, knowing we're going to adjust it throughout the way and not be tied to where those funds might be coming from, whether it's impact fees or vehicle registration fees or property taxes or whatever the various sources are. We have one priority list, and we can say this is how we're going to move on these. And if we say this is why this is going to move ahead, we'll have an explanation for it, and we've discussed it, and then we make that decision, as we do when we do budget adjustments and we move things up and down. So that's what I would argue, rather than, I think I just have more and more heartburn because I know that I have observed the impact fee balance go from negative now to this growing number that is going to demand it be spent. And that means we have to obligate property tax dollars from other uses that might be higher priority, but we're also obligating future maintenance. So both of those are saying because of the funding source, not because they're necessarily priorities based on the input we got from the cities and county and other stakeholders, but we're saying they're priorities simply because of this
this way in which the statute and ordinance has written into limitations on our funding source. So I would like to see us move there. And what I heard from you, Justin, is we could do it. It's a little more complicated, but that invites you to then include the commission in those discussions as to how we then move things as funds become available, and which ones are more prone to because they've been prepped, because they're shovel ready, can be moved forward.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I just wanted to add, and Commissioner Goldthorpe and I have talked about that as well. To Commissioner Hansen's point, I think it would be beneficial in our whole budget process. We've already talked about how we're going to jump right into the budget for next year and start having actual just workshops where we're just not being, told what the bottom line is and what the final numbers are, that we're going to have this integrated discussion. And I think it would be helpful as we start this process going forward to have the department heads come in. I mean, just having you in front of us, Justin, and clarifying and talking about, what's on the horizon, where are we, prioritization, etc., the good, the bad, the ugly. That really helps inform us as we go through the budget process, rather than just, and Christine does an amazing job, but she's here with the final numbers, and we're going line by line and looking at numbers, and she's the one that's kind of answering the questions unless we call out a staff member to come up. So the cities do this with their budget process. So the department heads come in and you kind of do your presentation about where we are, where we want to go, and we have the opportunity to kind of ask questions and get some exchange going about the whole process. And I think that would better inform our job, having the fiduciary oversight of the budget going forward. Because I know it's a little daunting when you just get the notebook and you just got lines and lines and lines of numbers, and you've got the heading and what it's being used for. But to get a little bit more feedback from each department, I think would really be helpful. So I would like to see that as part of our process going forward too. Sherwin, you did a great job sending out the revenue, breaking it. One thing, the sales tax, that's got to go back up to the state rather than the county. That was the one thing that still stayed down in the bottom half of that page. But there's been a lot of discussion about what exactly have we got from the legislature. So I would like to see exactly where. I think we've gone over everything, and I think it comes to about 20.4 that either we've gotten some, we're going to be getting more, but just have a better picture of, okay, what have we gotten? Where has it gone? What are we anticipating? What are the projected dollars that are still to come? So if we could get a picture of that, that would be helpful as well.
Mr.
And
President,
then one more question. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Marie.
So the minimum balance here, you say 22 million?
Yes.
So the difference between that and that 26.4, are we able to offset any of that money and access any of that money, or is that just strictly assigned here? I mean, is that money, free money that we, not free money, but unencumbered?
Mr. Commissioner May, you have full access to these things. Now, one of the things that we will remind you on is that based on what Sherwin was talking about, this is 2020. Your budget going into 2022 is larger, which means that to follow the guidance, not requirements, guidance, that number reserved in the back is going to get a little bit bigger. So you may not have that amount of dollars going forward, but we're, again, if that's something that you'd like to access, before we can do that, we'll discuss the risk, but then it's all up to you.
Restricted or not? Okay.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you, Director Wong.
You had a question, Alexis?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. President. Sherwin, can you describe what does the inventory include under non-dispensable?
So that is just the value of all of our inventory that we use for our operations.
Okay.
Items that we want to track because they're high dollar numbers. So at the end of the fiscal year, we had $5.9 million in inventory that we're tracking.
So why is it included if it's non-spendable?
Because it's not cash, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
It's a resource, but it's not a spendable resource.
Okay.
Thanks, Sherwin, that's much appreciated. I would remind the commission.
I have a question, one more question for Sherwin, before we dismiss him. and it's actually Commissioner Pickering's, remind me of that. There's an asset, and I don't know if our accountant's still here. Yeah. So, as a public entity, we have a 3-point-something billion. What's the number of the public asset that we're entrusted?
It's approximately 2.9 billion.
2.9 billion. So that's an estimation of the value, basically, of the right-of-way. All 5,000 something and something center lane miles plus signals and all the other assets that we have purchased for the public. And so, and we hold and manage for the benefit of the public. So how does that get reflected? And is there an analysis of how accountable we need to be towards the deterioration of that asset? I know that's the assumption under the maintenance program. We have so many roads, we're gonna have chip sealing, we have to do repairs. So that piece is there. How is that reflected? It's not reflected in the budget as much because that's about cash in, cash out. But this larger thing, when we are also, by adopting a budget and approving more capital expansion, we're adding assets, but they are also liabilities because we have an obligation to maintain them. So where does that analysis come in so we know that the general discussion has happened about how our maintenance obligations continue to outstrip our ability to maintain those assets? The state is doing the same thing. Feds are doing the same thing. They keep adding to the number of assets without actually addressing the gap, the maintenance gap that they're creating by adding to those assets. So where in our process can we address that, and is that reflected in the budget?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, that analysis is not part of the presentation of the audited financial statements, which is what I'm responsible for. But that is a really good question. The value of our assets, the $2.9 billion, that is included as part of our balance sheet in the asset section. But as to what it takes and what our plans are to maintain all of those assets and all the additional assets that we're taking on in the future, that's not part of the financial statements.
Right. That's an important discussion because obviously we don't want to let our assets deteriorate because the cost of replacing or repairing and so forth will continue to go up. So I think that analysis has to be in there and temper our eagerness to add to a whole bunch of new assets.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, we actually do account for that, and then we're more than happy to bring that presentation back again. It's in the strategic plan, and it's also in the CIP. So maintenance operations are accounted for. And again, if the commission would like to have another look at that, more than happy to do that.
Yeah, actually, that was my question. My question was related to the auditing of our assets, and so in the budgeting process, as we think about our reserve funds, what is this other liability that is lying out there? And I know it's there, and I've seen the presentations, and that's why not having it part of our budget discussion, makes us feel a little like, oh, okay, how are we going to do this?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I appreciate that. That's a good idea. As we move forward in this process, we're more than happy to incorporate what that future would look like. Going back to Commissioner May's request on what the unassigned might look at. In those, of course, are bridges, overpasses, facility stand-ups, all these things that have been looked at and brought to the commission for future consideration. I think that would be a great idea as we put this together to say, just so you know, here's what's over here as you make your very difficult discussions on what's right here. But Commissioner Hanson, we'll do that.
Okay, I really appreciate this. We appreciate this, Sherwin, and we're definitely going to have this in front of us as we go forward, especially with the integrated 5-year work plan. I would remind the commission that, and this dovetails into some of the discussion we've had in the last 20 minutes with regards to priorities and how we're going to spend money. We did pass a resolution a few weeks ago that impacted community programs. And part of that, the reasoning behind that wasn't just to fill sidewalk gaps, which I didn't say just because, as you know, that's a big deal to me, but it was to allow the commissioners to have a greater input into what happens with the integrated 5-year work plan. And I fully expect that that input is going to be much greater than possibly it has been in the past as we go forward after next week. I'm going to propose that after next week, we have a series of work sessions where we discuss those very things. When we take the 5-year integrated work plan as presented, that has the categories, the geographies, the municipalities, everything else that we've enjoyed watching before, so that we can look at it with an eye towards priorities. And I know we have priorities from everybody and their neighbor. We don't have a lot of priorities from commissioners. And that has become very obvious to me as a concern. And so we're going to address that over about a 4-week period, beginning the week after next. But I would ask that as we meet and certify a budget, and as we turn Christine loose on everybody she needs to see to let them know what's going to happen in this next year with regards to property taxes, that we just decide, okay, that's the number we're going to certify. We're going to talk about our general budget, that number. And we will talk about the project details going forward from that. So next week, what I'm hoping anyway is that we decide how much, if any, property tax increase we're going to ask for and pass, as well as how much, if any, foregone we're going to reach in for. And as you probably understand, my preference is that we don't do anything that's not permanent. So, but anyway, please be thinking about that very hard this next week. I believe it will make not only next week a lot easier, but with the opportunities we have for the next 4 weeks after that to discuss projects and priorities, that it will allow for a much smoother approval of whatever we want the 5-year integrated work plan to look like in September. It will result in less acrimony on the part of the commission, because we're going to take more ownership of this, and hopefully over time more pride in what we did or do. Anyway, that's the reason for this meeting today, was to hear from Ide Bailey and Sherwin. It was also to discuss, and I've just thrown out an idea here that is not news to any of you, about how we want to approach next week, and I would appreciate any other discussion now.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. President. I really appreciate that. What I really appreciate is your leadership on setting the priorities in the resolution we passed earlier, which set the tone, and that is a priority. That's why I think as part of our budget, we have to move towards a fully integrated priority list, so that in each of the 5 areas of our county, we can see how that plays out. And so I think it's highly important that we reach the goal of the resolution that we passed. And having now talked with Sherwin and understanding there's some flexibility in the priority corridor fund to make sure we get to that, I'd like to see us do that. So that's a real high priority for me. As you know, every year I basically mirror the priority list from the city, the school districts, and especially the neighborhoods from the area I represent, and help them understand why some of those things can't be higher priority. Everybody's own neighborhood feels like that should be the #1 priority, and explain to them why that is. And so I think that's our role. And so
I do have some priorities, and I see some of them have moved onto that list as per Spurgeon, some of the specific projects that are moving up that list. Kootenai, of course, has been on there a long time. So I think it's critical that each of us kind of dive into those same things, all of the projects, not separated out as to how they're funded, whether it's VRF fund or impact fee funds or whatever, but actually how it impacts our neighbors. So we can then say, we're going to go with this budget level, and that means, in this cycle, we're still not going to have the resources to do some of the design, or in most cases in our area, it's not right-of-way acquisition, it's mostly design. But in other areas, it does have to require a right-of-way acquisition. But I think that's very, very important, and I really appreciate you doing this, and I think that's critical to moving forward and us coming to a consensus on what that budget number is a fully integrated priority list. Even though it might be complicated for the staff, they're very competent, and I can see them managing it, and that they can then come back to us when they say, we need to move something out of a priority that you previously set. We're capable of saying, we understand, we agree, and we vote to adjust those priorities during the year.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I want to echo a lot of the same sentiments that Commissioner Hansen just shared. And I would just say, as somebody that's, somebody scolded me that I should say that I'm still a green commissioner, but I am going to say, though, that it's still taken, some time to get my feet under me to understand all the different levers and how, the decisions that we make impact other things and aspects of the agency, right? So I feel really excited to have and be part of those conversations after the budget, because now I feel a lot more prepared to be intentional and mindful about not only what I propose, but what are the benefits and consequences of those, things that I advocate for. So I am just very excited about that. And I also would just love to your point, Mr. President, hear what are your priorities, each and every one of you, and what your vision is for your district and how this can all connect to the county and in our region. So I am just very excited about that, and just very thrilled and grateful for the leadership on the commission for pushing this budget process to be more transparent and community focused and driven.
Hey, well, I'm sure you're going to hear all of that. Thank you. Is there any other comments from anybody about this whole work session? If not, we're done. Thank you.
Justin, can I just ask you my question up here?